Welcome to part 2 for lesson number 3. Picking up where we left off last time, we will begin discussing exactly what is meant by the word Celtic. We will examine 3 keys of Celtic identity and consider the complex challenge that they pose. These keys are language, material culture, and ethnicity. Let's go through these one by one. When considering language, it's important to note that the term Celtic was originally coined in the 17th century by antiquarians and scholars. They used this term to denote a family of Indo-European languages originating in Central and Western Europe around 1000 BCE. This may also suggest the existence of a Proto-Celtic civilization. How does language arise in the Isles? Is through culture and trade exchange with the continent, mostly by waterways, along seaways, rivers, but also through migration patterns. This led to the development of distinct dialects. We have, on the one hand, many continental forms which appeared in Europe. These include Hispano-Celtic, or Celtiberian. This would have been spoken in the Iberian Peninsula, is now a dead language. Gaelic or Gaulish, spoken in France, also obsolete. Lepontic in northern Italy, and also we see these languages in their insular form. Now there are 2 main forms that emerge. Brythonic, also Brittonic, or P-Celtic, which includes Welsh, Briton, and Cornish. Cornish disappeared as a native language sometime in the 18th century, but is currently under a revival. In the Isles, we also see Goidic or Q-Celtic. This includes Irish, Scots Gaelic, and Manx. Note that Manx has disappeared in the 20th century and is currently under revival. Pictured here is the land area that would have spoken some form of Celtic. In light brown, the continental form, and in dark brown, the form unique to the Isles. Note that the continental Celtic languages we know very little of. There are very few inscriptions, ancient reports, or traces in later languages. And the problem is that they were actually pre-literate cultures who stopped using these languages by the 5th century CE. On the other hand, the insular Celtic languages developed into full literacy from about the 7th century CE onward under Christian influence. What form the insular Celtic language took is an early form of writing which is called Ogham, invented in the 4th century, possibly by Christians, mostly recording personal names, so this would be on property and grave sites. It is known as Primitive Irish, and has ciphers based on the Latin alphabet. Of course, there is a mystical interpretation and tree association which occurred much later in the 10th century. Pictured here is the alphabet in Ogham writing with its rough English equivalent beside it. Moving now to material culture, with the Celtic people we have the formation of Latène art style, a distinctive and long-lasting indicator, though not found in all areas believed to be occupied by the Celts, nor in all periods during which Celts occupied these areas. For example, in Wales, material culture can only really serve as an approximate archaeological indicator for the presence of Celtic speakers. The Latène style originated in the Late Iron Age, which spans roughly from 500 BCE to the beginning years of CE. It is named for the location of an archaeological site in Switzerland, discovered mid-19th century. It is believed that the culture arose in Central Europe during the 5th century BCE and then later spread. What characterizes this style? It is characterized by abstract, flowing, curvilinear patterns, as well as stylized animal and human forms. Pictured here is a flagon of bronze from Lorraine, which is believed to have been created around 400 BCE. Note the stylized animal figure, as it will return later. Our second example is the Gunderstrup cauldron, originating in the Black Sea. This piece of metalwork was created around 100 BCE and was found in Denmark. A question surrounds its origin. It is either of Celtic origin or may originate as far away as India. Again here you can see the stylized animal figures. In addition, human stylized figures are present as well. Turning to the Celtic people, you'll see the same type of art style infused in their work. Pictured here is a Tyrone stone from County Galway. Now this is actually two images of the same stone, with the actual stone on the left and the image of what it would look like if it were flattened on the right. This would have been produced somewhere between the 3rd and 1st century BCE. The same curvilinear designs that we saw on the flagon are very apparent here. As with the Celtic languages, the Latène style gave way on the continent to the Roman style of art. But it survived in Britain and Ireland, crystallizing as the insular style during the 7th century CE, aka Celtic or Hiberno-Saxon art. As we will see, the insular style shares characteristics with Germanic or Scandinavian art. Remember that traveling over water is much safer than traveling over land during this period, so there's much mobility and exchange between these cultures. Pictured here is the Cabbage of Columbia of Psalter, produced somewhere between 560 CE and 630. Note specifically the lead letter. You see the same stylized animal and curvilinear design. Another example is the Linden Farm Gospel, produced somewhere in the late 7th, early 8th century. You feel again the movement in the piece. You see the stylized animal specifically on the lower left-hand corner of the image, and you see very much that same flowing design pattern that we saw earlier on the metalwork. Another example is the Book of Kells. Note again specifically around the edges of the images, you see these lions intertwined with one another. This is very much in keeping with Latène art style. Finally, we turn to ethnicity as key factor in what is Celt. It should be noted that it is very difficult to establish any correlations among language, material culture, and ethnicity. DNA research suggests there are links among populations of the Celtic Isles, and that they are distinct from continental Europe. Remember the myth that we debunked in part 1. This DNA research suggests links to maybe even Mesolithic Iberia. So what conclusions can we draw? Well, we know that the people of the Isles share a very ancient history shaped by geology, geography, and long cultural continuities, as well as creative innovations and exchange with other peoples. The term Celtic is perhaps best used to describe speakers of the Celtic languages and their descendants and cultures. Just a reminder, neither ethnicity nor material culture can be considered clear and unambiguous markers of Celticity. Within this course, we will take that Celtic refers to the peoples and cultures of the Celtic-speaking Isles of late antiquity and of the early medieval period. This ends our time together today. I invite you to look back at this tutorial and think about exactly how this fits in with the paradoxes we began the course with, specifically the theme of being connected to the continent, yet somehow apart and distinct. Also, with reference to the Latène art style, I invite you to go back and look for areas of continuity and discontinuity between the older examples and the Celtic books. I'll see you next week, and we'll take a look at when Christianity comes to the Isles.